Right, good evening, councillors and members of the public. Before we commence this meeting, I'd like to draw your attention to the fire regulations, which are on the screen behind me. We're not expecting to have a fire drill this evening, so if the alarm does go off, then the exits are the usual ones you would expect to find, the green marked exits. Please can you ensure your mobile phones are switched off or to silent? And councillors, can I please remind you to speak directly into the microphones as this meeting is, and your cards push firmly into the console. This meeting is being webcast. Members of the public, I would just like to say that I do understand, and as a committee we understand, that matters under consideration tonight can be very emotive. However, I would ask that you are respectful of those around you and of the committee, and that we have no disturbances. So now we move on to the main items of business. Minutes of the meeting, which took place on the 4th of November 2015, have been laid on the table for the last 30 minutes. Are you content that I sign these as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you. Have there been any apologies for absence, Fiona?
Thank you, Chairman. I've had apologies from councillors Mr and Mrs Stennett. Mr and Mrs Ellis aren't here. They may be stuck in traffic. I understand it's a bit heavy tonight, so we'll see whether they appear.
Thank you. And have members declared any interest before the meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've had two declarations in respect of agenda item 6.2, Longacre School, from Councillor Mike Band, a non-pecuniary interest. He's a member of the Traffic Committee that's referred to in the report. And from Councillor Seaborn, also a non-pecuniary interest. He's an unpaid non-executive director of St Catherine's Enterprises, which is a subsidiary organisation of St Catherine's School in Bramley. Consequently, he has an association with a fee-paying educational establishment that could be in competition to attract the additional pupils that are the subject of Longacre School's application.
Thank you very much. And do members have any non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? No. Okay. Do we have any questions from members of the public?
None, Chairman.
And are there any updates to government guidelines or legislation that the committee should be aware of, Elizabeth?
Thank you, Chairman. There are none this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the event of site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of these applications at this meeting, these will be held on Monday the 11th of January 2016. It's the first time I've said that. Not far off, is it? At a time to be agreed. Moving on to the planning applications. And this item, A1 WA 2015-1518, Longacre School, Hullbrook Lane, Shamley Green, GU5ONQ. Rebecca, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is under section 73A, to vary condition 14 of WA/2014/0065, which restricts the pupil capacity to 240, to allow the increase to 300 pupils, as amplified by letter dated 3rd of November 2015. The application site, outlined in red on the screen, is occupied by Longacre School, which caters for children aged 2 to 11. On site, there is a main school building and a collection of linked and detached buildings surrounding the main school building. An existing car park is located to the north of the site and immediately to the right-hand side of the access of Hullbrook Lane. There is a one-way traffic system in place at the school, which sees vehicles entering the site via Hullbrook Lane to the south, driving through the site, and then exiting to the rear onto Stonners Brow. To put the site into some sort of visual context for you, this is Hullbrook Lane to the top left, where vehicles enter the site. This is the school entrance off Hullbrook Lane, and then the lower car park, which I just showed you to the right-hand side. Moving up into the upper school area, the main school building is at the top, and this is the top car park, which you can see in that photo, and this one down the bottom. In terms of vehicles exiting the site, the top left-hand photo shows the exit onto Stonnard's Brow. The top right photo shows Stonnard's Brow, and then the bottom left one shows the corner from Stonnard's Brow leading into Sweetwater Lane and subsequently Sweetwater Lane. To go into some detail into the proposal, members will recall that an application under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act is in effect a fresh application for the entire development, albeit with a variation to a condition. In this instance, application WA/2014/0065, hereafter referred to as the 2014 permission, was granted by the Council on the 22nd of April 2014. The current proposal, therefore, is a fresh application for this development, albeit with a variation to condition 14 to allow for an increase in the pupil cap. Condition 14, as set out on the screen, restricts the number of pupils attending the school to a maximum 240 pupils. The current proposal therefore seeks to vary condition 14 to allow for an increase in the pupil number cap from 240 pupils to 300 pupils. The increase is proposed to take place over 3 academic years in what we call a phased approach. Phase 1 would see an increase in pupil numbers from 240 to 265. Phase 2 would involve an increase to 280 pupils, and Phase 3 allowing for a further increase to 300 pupils. Before discussing the determining issues, if I could just refer members to the update sheet, there have been a number of additional objections received on the application. These are noted, and officers consider that the grounds on which the objections have been raised are addressed within the officer report of the agenda. If I could now go into the determining issues. So the matters of principal and technical opinion are the principle of development, planning history, highway considerations, and the expansion of educational establishments. Firstly, referring to the principle of development, the site is located within the green belt outside of any defined settlement area, where there is a general presumption against inappropriate development which should not be approved except in very special circumstances. The site also falls within an area of great landscape value, wherein development should conserve or enhance the character of the landscape. Policy CF3 of the local plan states that proposals for new or additional educational establishments will be supported subject to their impact on the character of the area, compliance with other local plan policies, and relevant planning considerations. The principle of development was established by the granting of the 2014 planning permission. Whilst the applicant is applying for a variation of condition, the proposal is in effect a fresh application. Officers consider that there has not been a material change in planning policy or site circumstances since that application. As the previous planning permission established the principle of development at the site, this should not be revisited as part of the assessment of the current scheme. Turning to the planning history, as members will be aware, the planning history is a material consideration. Permission was firstly granted in 2004 for extensions and alterations to the main school building and erection of a dining room following demolition of existing buildings. Only the first phase of this permission, involving the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, was implemented. Permission was subsequently granted in 2014 for extensions and alterations. The differences between the two applications are set out on pages 18 and 19 of the agenda. Essentially, therefore, what has been built on site is a hybrid of both previous permissions. The test for members is whether the current proposal is materially more harmful than the approved scheme and whether it is acceptable in its own right. Turning to the highways considerations. The majority of third-party objections which have been raised in respect of the current application relate to traffic concerns, primarily that of increased traffic movements and highway safety. The County Highway Authority has noted the planning history of the site and recognises the constraints on the highway network surrounding the school, particularly the localised congestion which occurs during the morning drop-off and afternoon pick-up times. Whilst this is considered by the Highway Authority to not be ideal, it is an existing situation, and the Highways team has therefore assessed the proposal in that context. Taking into account the existing number of vehicular movements associated with the school, the County Highway Authority considers that the resultant traffic increase from an extra 60 pupils over a 3-year period would not have a severe impact on highway safety or capacity. As such, subject to conditions, the Highway Authority raises no objections to the proposal. Regarding the expansion of educational establishments, the MPPF attaches great importance to ensuring that there are school places available to meet the needs of existing and new communities. As such, great weight should be given to the need to expand schools to meet the requirements of communities. The principle of the proposal in terms of its acceptability with regards to policy CF3 was largely established by the 2014 Commission. In terms of the proposal's compliance with other relevant planning considerations, officers considered that the proposal would overall accord with relevant development plan policies. Turning to the matters of planning judgment, firstly the Greenbelt assessment, the principle of the acceptability of the proposed extensions and alterations was established by the previous permission. The Council concluded that the development would not materially harm the openness and amenity of the Greenbelt and would accord with policy C1. Officers consider that the proposed increase in pupil numbers subject to the current application would not result in any additional impact upon the openness above and beyond that already established by the 2014 permission. Turning to the impact on the AGLV, the Council concluded under the 2014 permission that the proposed development would preserve the distinctive landscape character of the AGLV in accordance with policy C3 of the local plan. The same considerations are applicable in this instance. Officers consider that the proposed increase in pupil numbers would not result in any additional material impact on the AGLV than the 2014 permission. Under the 2014 permission, turning to the visual amenity, the Council concluded that the form and design of the proposed development would enhance the site and it would not materially harm the visual amenity of the area. As the nature of the current proposal is such that there is no additional built form proposed, officers consider that there would be no likely additional impact to visual amenity than that established under the 2014 permission. Turning lastly to the impact on residential amenity, officers acknowledge that the current proposal would result in an increase in traffic movements along the neighbouring roads. However, it is considered that the scale of the increase would not be so materially harmful such to warrant refusal of the scheme. Notwithstanding this, the school has nevertheless proposed to phase the introduction of the increase. This phasing would effectively allow for a staged monitoring process of the likely impact on residential amenity to be put in place to mitigate and limit the consequent impact. Taking this into account, the recommendation is therefore as set out on pages 30 to 39 of the agenda and as stated in the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now, this item is subject to public speaking. I understand the procedure has been explained. And first, may I introduce the objector, Mrs. Kay Anderton of the Shamley Green Village Association, to speak. Good evening, Mrs. Anderton. You have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, the condition applied by Waverley 11 years ago and repeated last year was that at no time should the number of pupils attending the school be greater than 240. And the reason was in the interest of character and amenities of the area, the narrow access roads around the site, and to accord with policy D2 of the Waverley local plan. The Shamley Green character and amenities have not changed for many years, but Longacre has grown. 30 years ago, Longacre was a small school with around 130 pupils, but now it is close to the 240 limit. The roads from the school exit are wholly residential and cover some 800 yards up to the main road. 1/4 of this distance is only one vehicle wide, and 1/3 has no pavement. In addition, there are two tight, blind 90-degree bends. The school data presented for the May 2015 states that 357 cars use this route every day. But this is sadly inaccurate, as on average 30 to 40 cars per day are exiting from the Holbrook Lane exit, which does not have monitoring equipment, and therefore these cars are not counted in the school stats. If these stats have formed any part of your decision in this application, I would urge you to revisit your decision, as the information provided has been misleading. The difficulty which many residents experience in driving against the school flow and accessing their own driveways has been reported repeatedly in the 100 or so letters of objection. Furthermore, children attending other schools have to walk home towards Lord's Hill in the winter darkness against the flow of traffic. The Highway Authority notes that the cap on pupil numbers in 2004 and 2014 applications had been already imposed by Waverley Borough Council, and therefore it was not necessary for the authority to recommend the need for a cap. No material change in the site circumstances has occurred, and it is therefore abundantly clear that Longacre has reached its capacity for this site. Our parish council is not convinced that the applicant's proposal to mitigate the adverse effects of even more motor traffic will be effective. As part of the school's traffic plan, an assessment has been made of the impact of extra pupils, whereas the metrics for the latest September entry were known and calculations involving minibuses, car sharing and sibling ratios could be logical. A valid assumption cannot be projected for every future entry over the next 3 years. It is therefore vital that, should members be minded to grant an approval, additional conditions be imposed covering the presentation of a revised traffic plan with appropriate and enforceable traffic mitigation measures, as described in the school's alteration letter of the 3rd of November. Furthermore, prior to each stage of pupil increase, a valid traffic assessment covering both exits must be made to confirm that the previous measures have been effective. Finally, in my capacity as a resident of Shamley Green, a mum with 3 school-aged children, I would appeal to the members' judgment to consider if passing this application really will be in the interest of all parties. Thankfully, to date, we have not had a serious incident, but in light of the fact that our village residential lanes simply cannot accommodate more cars, I would pose the question as to how long it will be before we do see an incident. I would therefore urge you to consider protecting our village and residents from the increasing capacity of Longacre School, and to consider, in the absence of any financial pressures, how this decision can be different to previous decisions made in 2004 and more recently in 2014 to preserve the character of Waverley Borough in line with policy D2. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderton. And now, may I introduce the supporter, Andrew Blurton, Chairman of the School of Governors. Good evening, Mr. Blurton, and you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Longacre School as Chairman of Governors of the school concerning our request to increase the pupil cap from 240 to 300 by the end of 2018. As we've heard this evening, the pupil cap of 240 was set 10 years ago in 2005 when the first new buildings were constructed at the school. The planning consent received in 2014 repeated the same cap of 240, although local and national demographics had changed dramatically during that time. Longacre is a very successful school in educating its pupils, and for some time there's been excess demand for places at the school that have not been able to be accommodated because of the cap. Longacre has worked with Shamley Green Village for many years and has operated the traffic committee, which we've heard this evening, to deal with traffic-related issues. A large majority of members of this committee are non-school representatives and are therefore better placed to provide input into that committee over traffic issues. The school briefed the traffic committee in early July this year of the proposal to apply for an increase in the cap, and they expressed no major views against the proposals. Longacre therefore applied in July to increase the pupil cap from 240 to 300. A detailed analysis of traffic matters in the village was submitted to Waverley in September this year. The overwhelming evidence was that the traffic problems within Shamley Green do not arise solely from Longacre traffic. The head of Longacre and I met with the village on the 20th of October, and we listened carefully to the concerns that they raised. In almost all instances, these related to traffic going to and from the school. Thereafter, we submitted the amended application in November 2015 with the step level of increase that we have heard this evening, 265 in 2016, a year later increasing to 280, and only in the third year increasing to 300. This gradual increase will enable the school to fill places from the lower end of the school, but it definitely would not involve any additional classes, and indeed we have insufficient facilities and open space to educate more than 300 pupils. This stepping in pupil numbers would result in 9 year groups with 32 pupils in each year, totalling 288 in total, leaving a small margin to accommodate siblings of existing pupils. Longacre is implementing yet further additional management issues of its own volition and its own cost. In particular, we have just recently purchased a third minibus, increasing the school's ability to transport up to 48 pupils every morning and every afternoon without parents concerned having to drive through the village. We've also implemented a second traffic stud, and we've heard this evening that the traffic data did not monitor the exit onto Hullbrook Lane, and we've already implemented that change so that that can be accurately monitored and reported. We're continuing to provide the community with 6 weeks advance notice of events that will increase traffic above normal levels, such as sports days and so on. And we're investigating a traffic light system to control the flow of cars exiting the site. Longacre makes its facilities available to the community, and in particular the school's sports hall and AstroTurf facilities are available through an agreed community use agreement. Longacre is an independent school, but is very conscious of Waverley's educational and housing strategies and the additional pressures that are placed on the state system. In seeking this increase in pupil numbers, Longacre is also assisting in this policy by reducing the number of pupils that would otherwise use the state educational system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blurton. And now, members, over to you. Councillor Band.
Thank you. And thank you, public speakers. I mean, clearly this application is controversial, and it is difficult to reconcile the planning with the impact that people perceive, in the neighbourhood perceive this will have on their amenity. However, in planning terms, we've got to look at the two parts. Firstly, there is a presumption in the NPPF of giving considerable importance to ensuring that school places are there, and the presumption subject to the impact on no unacceptable impact on the amenity, that permission is granted for enhancing schools. The real issue, I think, in the impact on the amenity is the highway situation. And as we've heard from the public speakers, and it is real and it is really felt by the community. However, in coming to a decision as a committee, we've got to respect the comments of the County Council Highways and live with their acceptance of that there is no unacceptable, in their terms, not saying it's what everybody feels, but in their terms, unacceptable impact from the increase from 240 to roughly 20 a year over the next 3 years. So I think we're faced with having to live with that because we've got nowhere to go. And I think that takes us back to the conditions which are recommended by officers, and I think it's a very good report, I have to say, Rebecca. I think it's a very detailed report, and I think it covers all the issues in great length. But I do think there is scope for actually tightening up the conditions, and particularly when it comes to the review of the performance. And if we look at condition 28 and 29, and where we get into the detail of what the requirement for the school to come back for their increases are. I think we could go further. I mean, I would like to suggest we go further and set out fairly explicitly what we as the planning authority expect to see in this submission from the school. And I think, the key things we need to be looking at are firstly that evidence that the traffic plan is actually being implemented. And I'm certainly concerned to see these large numbers of cars which are now being reported coming out of Holbrook Lane, because that's not in the traffic plan. Especially if they're going back into the village and not round through Lord's Hill and to Norley Lane. And the second thing, I think, is that there's an expectancy to see evidence that the actions which the school have been taking actually do lead to an improvement in the pupil movement ratios, so that we want to see evidence that the work they've been doing in the past, and to be fair to the school in the past, there's a lot of work's been done actually reducing the impact of pupil traffic movements. That we want to see that's continuing. And I think we also would want to see what further action the school was proposing in the light of the next tranche of increase which they were looking for. So those are three areas which I think I would suggest we could add to that condition. Officers may want to suggest some words, but I think it would set out pretty clearly what we're expecting to see. From my perspective, we're going to give approval to the next stage. We're looking to see a continuous improvement in the performance of what the school's traffic plan is achieving. And the other thing, which is not mentioned anywhere in this report or any of the recommendations, is actually the traffic committee, which has been talked about. I do think we want to see that traffic committee in existence still. It was set up and instigated into the 2004 permission by this committee round this table, and I don't think apart from Morris, is anybody else sitting around the table who remembers that, but I think it's been a very successful introduction, and I would think we should be certainly encouraging that to be continued. And maybe even enhanced. I don't know what other members think. Maybe we should even be suggesting it should have an independent chair. I don't know what other members might think. It might give it some more credibility in terms of the dynamics between the school and residents, and perhaps suggesting that somebody maybe from the parish council should be chairing it rather than the school as it happens at the moment. But I mean, I'm willing to listen to what other people think about that. But from my perspective, reluctantly, I don't think we have real grounds for turning this down, particularly looking at the acceptance given by Surrey County Council Highways, subject to the conditions. So I think the avenue, from my perspective, actually is to enhance those conditions and make it quite clear we are looking for continued improvement and continued mitigation of the issues which our residents are so conscious of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I can't remember whether when the 240 was put on, whether it was something which was in the planning application that the school submitted, or whether it was something that the officers came up with. I suspect it would have been the school, because this council can't say how viable a school is with numbers, or what the numbers are for a school to be. We haven't the expertise. But I suspect the 240 was a number that was probably in the original 2004 application, which was then repeated in 2014. But if there's any more information about that, I'd be grateful. But the fact of the matter is that, having looked and read in detail the Highway Authority's views, we are in effect on a hiding to nothing to refuse this application on highway grounds. We would have an appeal, we'd lose the appeal, we'd probably be ordered to pay costs. So it would be irresponsible, in my view, to try and refuse this application on highway grounds, and there isn't any other reason, and there's not much concerns either from local residents on anything else apart from highways. I do, however, go along with what Councillor Band has said concerning the conditions. We all know what the school intend to do and what they're saying they're going to do, and I think it's very important that we should see that that is done and that we should monitor the situation. I think it is a good idea that the school has come up with to phase the matter over 3 years. It does mean that we can see how we go on each phase and then monitor each phase. So I think that is a good step that the school has put forward. And I think this local committee that was set up in 2004, it should increase. I think it should continue. And I'm therefore happy to go along with or second or whatever the officers can come up with to strengthen. I see scribbling is going on the table to see if these conditions can be toughened, and I would go along with that, just to ensure that what the school have offered to do is done. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, if I might just come in at that point, just to pick up on the comments of Councillors Band and Goodrich, just to say that Councillor Goodrich is absolutely right that in the absence of an objection from the County Highway Authority, it wouldn't be reasonable to refuse this application on grounds of highway safety for all the reasons that were given. But we have been very mindful of the concerns of local residents in the community about the issues that were effectively set out in the public speaking comments. And I would say that in assessing this planning application, the school as applicants have been very willing to talk about ways in which the conditions could be phrased in such a way to mitigate as far as possible the concerns that have been raised. So as officers, in conjunction with the non-prejudicial involvement of the ward member, we have been working very hard to try and get to the bottom of how this could be most effectively captured in planning terms. We're very happy to accept that the conditions that we've recommended to the committee could be enhanced based on the further comments of Councillor Band. And I wonder if I could suggest in the first instance that the condition 29, which effectively is the key condition requiring the monitoring of the phasing, be enhanced by an informative which would set out to the applicants the sorts of criteria that would be used by the council in assessing whether or not it was appropriate for them to go forward to the next phase. I think it would be more effective to do that by informative than condition, because I don't think necessarily we can capture here and now all the criteria that the council may wish to use in deciding whether to let the school advance to the next tranche. So picking up the points that have been suggested, I would suggest perhaps the wording of an informative number 7 would be something along the lines of linked to condition 29. The approval of subsequent phases will be assessed against including the following criteria. Firstly, the expectation of the local planning authority that there would be a resultant decrease in pupil-stroke-traffic ratio, or else that there is no materially greater planning harm caused to local amenity by the discharge of each phase of the proposal, as set out in condition 14. And then picking up the other 2 points that Councillor Band suggested, that the actions, that there would be evidence that the traffic/travel plan is explicitly being implemented, and that would be for the school to submit at each stage evidence to us that they are carrying out the actions in the travel plan. And then thirdly, I think your point was that that the school submit further actions that they are seeking to introduce in proposing to introduce in the new tranche of the new school roll. So I hope that would pick up those, but not make them completely exclusive, because there may be other things that come into play at the relevant point. And then I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, because I think she's considered some wording about your other point in relation to the committee, the traffic committee. Thank you, Chairman. If I can pass over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just firstly to pick up on a point with regards to monitoring the traffic exiting on Holbrook Lane, with the installation of the second traffic stud, which will monitor and include the traffic counts and at that location, we can obviously include that with the traffic data. Secondly, to pick up on what Elizabeth has just mentioned with regards to the traffic committee, if I can refer to the recommended condition number 5, which refers to the submission of a school travel plan. I personally think it would be best to link in something to that recommended condition, perhaps along the lines of including further wording along the lines of the travel plan shall indicate details of a traffic community which will oversee, monitor and review the implementation of the travel plan. The traffic community shall operate for the duration of the school's operation at the site unless otherwise first agreed in writing by the local planning authority. Oh, sorry, community, traffic community. Committee, sorry, to apologise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rebecca. Would that go some way to, or would that fit the bill for you, Councillor Band?
Thank you. I think sort of 99%. I think the other point I was trying to make is I recall the original traffic plan exiting onto Holbrook Lane and going back into the village was not included in it. So I think, you know, the traffic plan was very focused on entering the school via Holbrook Lane and exiting via Stonehill's Brow, except if people were going to exit through Lord's Hill and onto Norley Lane. So I think it's all very well to monitor the stuff going out of onto Holbrook Lane, but the next thing we'll have is all the residents in Holbrook Lane screaming blue murder because there's a lot more traffic in Holbrook Lane. So I think we do need to see that the concept of the traffic plan is in itself being monitored. The fact they're going out there and not going into the data is one thing, but the fact they shouldn't be going back into the village in any case. That's not part of the deal.
So can I just be clear? What's been proposed here is an addition to condition number 5. Is that right? Which you've just read out. And is it also suggested that the traffic committee should become a condition or an informative or be mentioned somewhere?
The words that Rebecca read out were additional wording to be inserted within condition 5. Yes, thank you, Chairman.
So there's no other alterations to the condition except for that one?
Unless, picking up on Councillor Band's point, that the reference to an updated school travel plan could include an addition to include revised arrangements for access arrangements or something along those lines to ensure that the access arrangements are constantly being reviewed to ensure the most effective means of entering and exiting the site.
Yeah, I just think we just need to evidence that they are actually implementing. It's one thing to have a plan. I think we need to see the evidence that it's actually being implemented. That's all, because that's the key issue. If 25 plus cars are disappearing, you know, out of the system in a different way, which is not in the travel plan, it clearly distorts the picture that's being presented. So I think we need, you know, in the informative. I think this goes back to the informative attached to linked to condition 29. One of the things has to be that evidence that the traffic plan actually is being enforced. I don't want to project how he might do it, but that's the issue.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. That's if I could just say that's what I meant to say. Travel plan rather than traffic committee. Sorry. Carry on, Elizabeth.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. In which case, I think our recommended first criterion would pick that up, Councillor Band, that evidence that the travel plan is being implemented would ensure that particular point is taken into account. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Now, Councillor Ellis would like to speak. I just must make it quite clear that as you were late and haven't heard the whole debate, you may not vote, but you may speak. Thank you, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologise for having been unavoidably delayed. I think it's the first time in 16 years or more that I've ever been late, and I'm really sorry that it should happen on this occasion. I'm absolutely certain that Longacre School could support increased numbers and continue to provide an excellent education and wonderful facilities for the increased numbers that are proposed. However, I'm afraid that my overwhelming concern is traffic congestion that happens twice a day during term time. Whilst I appreciate the officers and my fellow councillors' recommendations that it would not be reasonable to refuse its application on the highway grounds, I have to say that I've lived in the area fairly close by for 40 years now, and I've seen huge increases in traffic. And I'm sorry to say that I really cannot believe that there is any way that the nightmare situation experienced by residents and other visitors to the area could be mitigated in any way. We restricted the number of pupils, and I was at the previous meeting when we determined that for very sound reasons. I'm very sorry. I do not believe that the plan, even though I appreciate the school, really wants to work hard with the residents in the area. I don't feel that this could assist in any way to alleviate the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. And Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I wanted one point of clarification, and it refers back to the traffic plan. We have an existing traffic plan with all its conditions, and I wanted to be ensured that that basically gets transferred into this application, and it's not a new traffic plan. So any of the restrictions, conditions that previously took place are actually carried forward. Now, it might be my understanding of the conditions, but I'd like an assurance that explicitly that's covered in the conditions the officers have set out, which I think, I repeat the comments made earlier, I think the report is extremely good and quite very readable. Thank you.
Do you wish to come back at all, officers?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to respond to those comments, looking at the wording of the recommended condition, I think that would be referred to. It does mention in general accordance with the aims and objectives of the Longacre School Traffic Plan 2013. So what we're asking is the submission of a new traffic travel plan, but to take into account the aims and objectives of the previous plan.
Just come back. I understand what you've said, but I want to make sure that they can't submit a new traffic plan that is any worse than the 2013. That 2013 must be considered to be a base in terms of going forward.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that the point to give you comfort, Councillor Gray, is that this is a condition that will need to be discharged. So the Council has full power over approving the detail. So the details will come in and officers will consider it very carefully, if necessary discuss it with the ward member, and we won't be approving it unless the Council is absolutely satisfied that it's fit for purpose. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Councillor Goodrich.
Yes, I just wanted to raise one small point. We're talking about this travel plan, and I think condition 5, it's going to have some amendments to it, but the condition 5 does make it clear that we have an updated school travel plan in accordance with the aims and objectives of the 2013 travel plan, and we have to approve it. But it does go on to say the applicant shall then implement the travel plan, because I think that was something that Councillor Bann was worried about, and thereafter maintain and develop the travel plan to the satisfaction of the local authority. So the local authority are involved at all stages, and implementation is part of it. So having a plan which you don't implement is not going to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Danis.
I am concerned about the visibility looking at the photographs. I don't know the area that well, but clearly going into Stonard Borough, I think it is, the visibility is very, very poor. What does concern me is we're saying that the Highways Authority are saying it's not safe, or it is safe, so that there's not a ground. I would just make the comment, it does mention there was one slight injury accident on a child. to me that's one accident too many. So that is a concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess for the second meeting running, as a new member, I'm rather concerned about the fact that the minute Surrey Highways say it's okay, we have to back off. I've looked at this application in considerable detail, and I have some concerns about both the currency of the Highways assessment in the light of some information that has been published or things that have happened over the last few months, and based on my industrial experience, I'm a little concerned about some of their methodology, and it's probably more a rhetorical question to the officers of what can we actually do to query issues like this when we're told it's all okay, and yet we don't feel in our conscience that it is okay. If I can quote some of the evidence, for instance, in the last only 3 weeks ago, there was a crash on the B2128 in Wonersh, only a mile from the school, with a fatality. Okay, so the Highways Authority says that there haven't been major accidents in the area, and yet we've had a fatality within a mile of the school. And nothing to do with school traffic, probably, but it just demonstrates that the roads in this area are not particularly safe. And if you're adding volumes of traffic to it, it's not good. Second point I'd like to make is that at the Towns and Parishes meeting on Monday, we were given data showing that in comparison to the national average for killed and seriously injured casualties on England's roads between 2012 and 14, the national average 39.3 casualties per 100,000 people. Waverley's got, the regional figure is 47.9, and Waverley has got a figure of 49.3 and getting worse. So, how does adding more traffic in any area, but specifically here where the roads are not suitable, how does that help? And, have Surrey factored that into their assessment of road safety? Third point, from working in the oil industry for a long time, we look at risk in a different way. And here, Surrey Highways tend to use a tried and tested traditional method of risk analysis, but actually oil industry practice over the last 5 years has come on a long way and identified that under certain circumstances, the methodology that Surrey are using is not appropriate. When a car collides with a small child, the outcomes are not part of the traditional triangle of events. The outcomes are either a near miss or something very serious. And that's not factored into this assessment. We're told there have been no accidents or no significant accidents in the area. And that's going to indicate that they're not likely to be any significant accidents. Well, I've already heard it said at least once this evening that actually something serious is about to happen, and I'm inclined to believe that based on my experience. And then the final point I'd like to make is that there's a website that I refer members to called ambulanceresponsetimes.co.uk. This makes available performance data for ambulance response times to emergency calls by postcode over the 3 years prior to 1Q 2014. And the data show that the GU5 postcode has the worst performance in Waverley against the national target of 70% of emergency calls attended to within 8 minutes. The quoted figure for GU5 was only 29%, with a mean time of nearly 10.5 minutes for a response time. The numbers compare with response figures of around 70% and 6 minutes for the better served parts of the borough. So, this is not specific to Longacre, it's a general problem in the area. We want to add more cars in an area where, there's a real risk that ambulances can't get to injuries quickly. And unfortunately, the most likely time for there to be an accident is during school drop-off and pick-up time when congestion is at its worst. So I really appreciate the efforts that we're making to try and come to a solution here, because Longacre is clearly doing an excellent job as an educational establishment. But there are some background issues that I really bring big concern to me over the way Surrey Highways are handling this and the way that we have to back off and just say they've got it right. I'm not convinced that they have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. You do make some very good points, but unfortunately they're not planning issues, and that is the problem. And so perhaps that conversation and those facts and details are for another time, another meeting.
May I come back
Yes.
very quickly? So MPPF 32 states that plans and decisions should take account of whether safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved by all people. Surely that's what I'm bringing up.
Yes, that's why we consult with county highways, and unfortunately if we're not satisfied with what they do, that's another issue altogether. We have to take their advice, and our officers ask them to tell us what they feel about the situation. They do, and we have to accept that. But if we want to challenge highways, that's a conversation for another time and another place. I don't think it's for this committee to do. But you do make some very good points, generally speaking, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Forczewski.
Thank you, Chairman. And I totally endorse what you've just said there, and I take on board the comments that were made. They're very eloquently put, but they have no bearing or relevance on this particular application, because we are looking at a much bigger picture in a much bigger area, and the Highway Authority is the statutory consultee in this and has given advice that the impact is not as great as we think. When we think about it more holistically, which is about coming forward in the future with the number of houses that are going to be built, this number really does pale into insignificance. So if we're not going to allow here, we certainly are not going to allow anywhere else. Can I just say to the officer who presented the report as well, that I thought you presented it beautifully. I thought it was very comprehensive, short and beautifully presented. I wholeheartedly support what Mike Band has said. I think if we strengthen the conditions and we get this as tight as we can, it's not the ideal solution for what everybody wants, but it is a good compromise, and I would support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Forczewski. Is there anybody else? Councillor Byer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been listening with great interest and listening to both sides of the argument. The one thing that concerns me, and there's nothing can do about it, but I'm going to say it anyway, looking at the relevant planning history, it doesn't tell me when the school started, I don't think. I don't think it started in 2004, which is the first application we have on our list. It would have started many, many years before that. And I just can't remember. And I was here for the 2004 application, and therefore have dealt with it all over those years. And right up to last year, when we made a decision just 14 months ago to increase the size of the property for the number of pupils that are there at present, 240 pupils. So did they build too many buildings to cope with the 240 pupils, or did they apply in anticipation of increasing it but not telling us? And that is the concern that I have, that these stories... So are we now saying we're over complementing the school now and therefore they'll need more buildings, and next year we will have another application for more buildings, or are they now satisfied? It doesn't stack up to me. It seems, well, dishonest in the way that it's applied, because consistently all the way through we've applied for 200, we've had 240 pupils, we've extended the school, we've allowed the extension of the school, and we now have a requirement to increase the population by a considerable amount. How do we trust the people that make planning applications that they are being truthful in the way that they're applying their data and what we're doing?
I'm sorry, Councillor Byam, I think I must stop you there, because I believe we're just going a step too far with the language, if you don't mind. If you could make your point, I don't think you can make accusations like that. I think that's going a little bit too far. Are there any other comments? So in that case, the recommendation is that subjects... Now, bear with me. I think I've got it, but tell me if I haven't. The recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 29, with additions to condition 5. Do we need to hear those again, or do we understand what they are? And informatives 1 to 6 with an extra informative to be attached to condition 29. No?
not attached, Chairman, to relate to. So they'll come in as informatives and refer to condition 29, but they won't actually be attached to it. Thank you.
Sorry. So take that word away. To relate to condition 29. Are we happy with that, members? May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
6 in favour of granting.
Thank you. And those against? And those abstaining?
3 abstentions.
Thank you, members. The recommendation to grant is agreed. And now we move on to the non-speaking items. Item B1, WA 2015 1830, and we will just wait for a moment. Okay, so item B1, WA 2015 1830, Dunsfold Park, Stovells Hill, Cranley. Tim, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the application is for a change of use from office to non-residential educational institution class D1. The building subject of the application is here outlined in red. The application site is within the Dunsfold Park, the wider site of the Dunsfold Park. The unit proposed to be used by adults with learning difficulties who are currently attending the Jigsaw School, which is well established at Dunsfold Park. The school operates from existing buildings at the eastern end of the site, which includes classrooms, offices and outdoor play space. The current Jigsaw School is subject to a temporary permission up to 30th of April 2018. The existing unit itself is B1 office. It is currently vacant. The proposal would not alter the existing layout within the building itself or any external alterations. And so the existing proposed ground floor is as shown, as is the existing and first floor plans. Run members through some site photographs. This is the building here. It has its own parking at the front. Although it isn't attached to another commercial building on the site, it does have its own independent parking there. In terms of the determining issues with this application, the proposal is seeking a temporary change of use, which, as outlined in the agenda with the conditions, is tied to the wider commercial temporary use. The application has come about because the business on site currently needs the space that the existing school is in, and hence they are seeking permission to use this current vacant building on the site. Given that the use is for temporary only, officers consider that the principle of the proposal is acceptable, and really there would not be material impact on residential amenity or visual amenity, which is the judgments here for you. So, members, the recommendation is for permission to be granted as set out with you in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Over to you, members. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you for that. This is a rural area, and we know the transport position in this area, but this is a very low use this change. It's low key, and I don't think it will affect significantly, if at all, traffic movements in the area. This is a change of use of an existing building, and I do note the comments about the temporary permissions, which I think are important to have raised. I think, although there's a loss of commercial and industrial space, this application does mean that the school can continue and it will maintain the employment that the school encourages. Jigsaw, people will know, provides a very valuable service and are very dedicated to supporting adults with autism. I also note the traffic movements that have been highlighted, the existing 2723, and again, I think that's sort of a correct way of showing that. But I am supportive of this application, but do feel the 4 conditions that have been set out are appropriate, necessary, but I think actually essential as well with the current position. So I would support those 4. So I do support this locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other? Councillor Band.
Thank you. Well, I agree with my colleague. I mean, Jigsaw is a fantastic organisation and provides a fantastic service to people with autism and other difficulties. And if you ever see them at work, you would want to do everything you can possibly to support them. And I think this is a minor change in the context of Dunsfold Park as a whole. And I think we should be supporting it, and I entirely endorse the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Byam.
Yes, I also am supportive of this. I'm trying to understand exactly what's going on, but I think probably they're just moving just one spot. I remember going to the opening session of the same group of near adult children, near adults, and their facilities, and remembering what was provided. So we're not getting it doesn't look like we're getting an increase in numbers of people, but we are getting a more intense use of the other building that they're now vacating, which is good for that company. So overall, I support what's happening.
Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm fully supportive as my colleagues. I've just got one question to ask, and that is condition 4. And does condition 4 represent the current day-to-day number for total vehicle movements, or the numbers after the previous application that was approved for the extension of the commercial building?
Thank you, Chairman. It's the previous cap that was that exists on the 2007 overarching B1, B2, B8, on the basis that there's capacity within the scope without the employment use to pick this up. But even if they implement the employment use, that obviously it would fall within that as well, so it wouldn't fall foul of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? You ready to go on to the recommendation? Is that subject to conditions 1 to 4 and informative 1, as set out on pages 59 and 60 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
It's all in favour.
Thank you, members. The recommendation to grant is agreed. And so there are no items to consider in exempt, so that concludes the meeting this evening. Thank you, members.